Hey, what's up, you guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Just a Brit Abroad podcast. This is episode number 4, and this one is going to be a really, really fun one. We've got a super cool interview coming up with a guy that lots of you are going to know. I think you'll recognise him from TikTok, if not Instagram or somewhere else on the internet. I really encourage you to check out the whole interview. He's got some really cool stories, including the time he met Zara Larsson, so look out for that. Anyway, over to the interview. So today's going to be a great episode because I'm joined by a fellow Brit here in Sweden. He hails all the way from Scotland, but you might know him better as a singer-songwriter and content creator. I won't say any more. Take a look for yourself.
3 things I will never get used to living in Sweden. The last one is worth waiting for, pun intended. Number 1, people telling me their age, by which year they were born, rather than just telling me their age. I mean, I'm good at maths, but still. Number 2, people asking me if I'm available in vecka 29. Mate, I'm lucky if I know what day it is today. Number 3, standing in a queue in order to push a button to get a kö-lapp to then be put into a virtual queue.
Please welcome Archie McCallum to the show. Hey Archie, how's it going?
I'm good, Greg. Thanks for having me here.
Absolutely. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. I think it's going to be great to get into, your story and what you're about. And I mean, I guess that's probably the best place for us to start. How did you end up in Sweden in the first place?
Well, I played football for 3 summers in Sweden. And then after 3 summers, I basically moved in 2016, and then I've been working within music as well since. And now, Sweden's like home now.
Oh, fantastic. And you, as I mentioned in the intro, of course, you're from Scotland originally. What kind of part of the country?
A small town called Aberfeldy in Highland Perthshire, and then spent a lot of time in Glasgow before I came to Sweden, so maybe 7 years in Glasgow.
What part of Sweden did you find yourself in?
Well, geographically, it's like the middle of Sweden, but it's way north of Stockholm. Yeah, it's just a lovely small town. I basically was just introduced to the community here and made to feel very welcome. I just fell in love with the place basically from day one. And every time I went back to Scotland, I would sort of miss Sweden. And then I would just come back the next summer, and then after a while I decided I'll just move here. And then I would say I experienced my first winter.
You touched on something that a lot of the viewers will also be able to relate to, the kind of feeling that you hear people talk about Sweden and Swedish summer, and you kind of come with those tourist eyes, that kind of tourist lens on it. You also mentioned, of course, being that bit further north of Stockholm and the impact that has on light in the winter as well. What was that like for you the first time?
I remember posting something saying, it's starting to get pretty cold. Like I was basically freezing, and it was October, and my friends here in Fränsta were like, "You have no idea, mate. This is absolutely nothing." And then, a couple of years later, I was like ice fishing on, a frozen lake, minus 30 or something. But at the same time, it's like there's lots of things in place for you to deal with it. There's a way to embrace it as well. So I love that as well.
Yeah, of course. No, I think that's such a good attitude to come with. And as you say, there's a lot of Swedish sayings as well that kind of relate to, there's not such thing as bad weather, it's just bad clothes. And that really plays into the whole mentality of, as you say, like making the most of, it might be minus 30 outside, but let's see how we can find, some really beautiful moments in that too. But what does a normal winter look like where you're living? What kind of temperatures is normal?
It can be consistently minus 15, minus 20 for quite a while. And then you're thinking like, it's like a dark place, and it can be a dark place mentally as well. And then sort of end of February, when you come into March, that's when you're starting to see the see the light.
And I was going to ask you about that actually, because you said, your background in Scotland, of course, is from, quite a small community, and then you found yourself in quite a small community here in Sweden. What was if you were to kind of compare and contrast that, were there any kind of shocks or surprises in terms of the differences between small village mentality in the two countries, or was it quite similar?
It's the same spirit, and like people borrow, like tools from each other, and it's just how a small town works, and I kind of understood that from the beginning. Everyone mucks in. The big difference was the pubs. No pubs.
Yeah, of course, really playing into the UK stereotypes now. I'm sure you get asked a lot too, do you miss the pubs? And clearly that's something that was noticed straight away. You touched a little bit just there about kind of cultural differences and the way that people greet each other or the way that people interact. And I'm glad you did, because that's kind of a topic that we've been talking quite a bit about on the channel over the last couple of weeks. And so maybe it would be cool if we could dig kind of a little bit deeper into that now. And I'm wondering, were there any other standout cultural differences for you when you first arrived that it took a bit of adapting to, or took you a little bit by surprise?
I think, there was loads of little ones, but a big one that I always remember is just the banter is different here. Banter is great here, but it's different. Just in terms of roasting people as a sort of term of endearment, like that kind of thick skin that you develop over a lifetime of being roasted.
Right.
Like, I just quickly realized that people weren't really interested in being roasted, like from someone they didn't really know. Like you can roast someone when you've known them for a while here in Sweden.
Yeah.
And it's all fun and games, but it takes much longer to get that sort of common ground and someone comfortable. That's what I noticed. I was getting strange looks because I was so sarcastic, before I came here. Like, I speak in opposites, basically.
Yeah.
Like, but like if I was saying opposites here, people are, it's not their mother tongue, and they're taking what I say literally, and of course they are.
I've got to take the opportunity while I'm talking to a Scotsman to bring up that when as I said, I posted this video kind of recently about cultural differences, and I picked up on the fact that, at least from someone in the south of the UK, it's a little bit unusual, or takes some adjusting to, when you hear Swedish people use what we would consider to be swear words quite casually. They just kind of drop them in and throw them about in sentences, skitbra and fan and things like that. And I flagged that and said, that was something that, took me by surprise. You sit in a meeting with your boss and, he throws every F and C bomb you like at you. And then I got a comment from somebody that said, yeah, well, I think you've taken that to heart too much, because, I'm living up in Glasgow and they do that quite a lot. So I'm wondering, I guess that wasn't so much of an adjustment for you. that kind of felt like something familiar from home.
Totally. I love that, man. Love that. Yeah, Glasgow, that's just my favourite city in the world, probably. Just that, it's so huge, but there's such a community feeling in Glasgow. And I think maybe Gothenburg would remind me the most of Glasgow in Sweden. Yeah, sentences start with a swear word in Glasgow, and then connecting words are swear words. When you're just thinking, like someone will just swear while they're thinking, and continue their sentence. Even on TV, that's the thing in UK as well. Like, TV is so strict, and like you get people complaining.
I guess that also, that plays into maybe the musical influences that I'm sure we'll get into later as well. But the same when you listen to the radio here, and they're always playing the uncensored version of the track. And I guess, maybe from someone with a real musical kind of blood within them, that must feel quite liberating, because then you're playing the song the way the artist intended it, rather than playing some watered down version to suit the masses that might be offended, like you do in the UK.
Yeah, it's liberating. I hadn't thought of that actually, but you're spot on.
And as I say, I will come back to the music later, because although I'm not musical myself, I'm a deep music consumer. I love talking about production, lyrics, all of that kind of thing. But before I do, I don't think my viewers will forgive me if I don't talk to you about the how it was for you learning Swedish, and that process. So we talked a little bit about language, and of course language differences, the way that we use language in different ways. But how you obviously speak some Swedish. How did that come about? What was the journey towards that?
First of all, you are doing amazing. I saw your video on speaking Swedish after only 2 years, which is incredible. And yeah, it was first 2 years for me, or first 3 summers. I was actively curious and wanted to learn, but it was really tough because I was mostly speaking English, and everyone's so good at English, as you know, that it can be detrimental to learning Swedish. And obviously, you don't want to use excuses, but at some point, I had to just bite the bullet and say, I'm moving here now officially, and I want to learn the language. And it was a moment. It was like humor, comedy, and around a group when everyone's speaking Swedish and someone's telling a story and the place erupts. You're just sitting there like, I can't genuinely laugh at this because I do not know what this guy's on about. And that's the moment where you're like, I'm coming back to this table and I'm going to understand it. I'm going to add something to the table in Swedish. I started studying music here at Folkhögskola, and everything's in Swedish. So I was like, that was so great for me because I just had to jump in and learning all the music terms in Swedish and just speaking to people in Swedish.
But that's super impressive in itself, because you really dropped yourself in at the deep end. I'm wondering, of course you were doing these classes in music and picking up terms as you go. Did you do any sort of formal Swedish training on the side of that, or was it all very much just immerse yourself and pick it up on the fly?
I did like an intensive like Duolingo, that sort of free learning online, and I did that intense for like a couple of months. Just did it, had nothing else to do, and just used it all day and sort of crammed in as much as I could. The musical thing with like your ear, like the musical ear, like is a lot with picking up language and in terms of how a melody sounds and being able to, imitate a melody. So in a sense, I can make it sound like kind of Swedish, but I don't have a huge vocabulary. You're on a course just now, or?
Yeah, so I work full time, but then I do distance courses along the side. So I also, funnily enough, recognise the whole Duolingo approach. That was where I started, and I started kind of practicing and learning a little bit, pieces here and there with that, just before I moved out to Sweden, actually. And then when I came, I signed up to, in my area at least, Folkuniversitet had a program that you could do following the normal international standard, the A1, B1, C1 version of language learning. So I was doing that twice a week in the evenings after work, while I was waiting to get... I'd applied to the SFE program. For anyone that doesn't know, that's the Swedish for Immigrants program. So I'd applied for that and was waiting for my application to go through, doing Folkuniversitet on the side. Then once I got SFE, I was doing kind of both of those. So between the two, 3 nights a week, but SFE at distance, and as I say, the Folkuniversitet in place with other students. And then of course the pandemic hit, so ever since then it's been very much self-directed learning using a curriculum, but online as much or as little as you want. But a bit like you, I mean, it's really refreshing to hear a fellow British person talking about wanting to come back to the table, wanting to be understood, wanting to be part of the conversation, because as you say, I think there's a real maybe stereotype, or maybe it's an expectation, I don't know, but because Swedes are known for being so good at English, I think lots of people then decide maybe that puts them off being quite so determined or motivated to push forward with their language, whereas it sounds like the approach you're talking about is the opposite. You really wanted to be understood and be able to express yourself. And I was going to ask you, how long do you think it took before you could go back to a table like the one you spoke about and really have that conversation and make that contribution that you wanted to make?
After a full year, so that would have been like my 4th year in Sweden. That's when I started to feel comfortable. And not in terms of vocabulary, but just in terms of that moment when you start to understand, you understand the language, or you tend to understand the language well before you can speak it with any confidence. So I would happily just be a part of a room, and I don't have to be the guy that you have to speak English with. I got that sort of guilt where someone would explain the joke that was really funny in Swedish, and then someone would explain the joke in English, and everyone would listen to this person explain it in English. The moment's gone, and then I've got to sort of do a fake laugh at the end of like, because it's really nice of them to share it with me, but the moment's gone.
Of course. And you spoke about, it wasn't necessarily straightforward to learn the language, though, of course, the musical influence obviously did you some favours there with the rhythm and tempo of the language, which I thought was absolutely fascinating. But if there was something that you had to kind of pinpoint that was particularly difficult when it came to learning the language, what would you say you particularly struggled with?
Lots of it, but I loved it. I love language and I love melody, and sort of I would just purely imitate people, kind of for a laugh. But then after a while, you're like, well, this is actually starting to sound quite Swedish or quite norrländsk where I am, and that was a huge moment when I was down in Stockholm, and some Swedes were taking the piss out of me for my accent, because they believed that I was like a norrlänning, and they were like, "Oh, that your accent's so cute" or whatever. But they believed I was Swedish, and I'd be like, have a go back at them, but I was delighted because that was the moment that, I've made it, kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
I've fooled someone. It was a huge feeling.
Yeah, of course. The pride that comes with, what was meant as almost like a bit of a tongue-in-cheek insult to you was like, you're beaming on the inside. You're like, yes, I've made it. I've convinced them. Can completely relate to that. And I'm wondering, maybe as someone that's obviously come quite a long way in their Swedish journey, and you've spent, 5 years here now, I guess. I'm just wondering, for somebody that's just starting out and they just moved today and they want to get started with the language, is there anything that you found along the way that you think would be helpful that you'd recommend someone else to do? I'm thinking a bit like, whether that's a resource that you liked or, watching TV or listening to Swedish music. What was useful for you?
Get out there and speak to people. Obviously, that's off the cards just now, but just speaking to people or observing how Swedes speak to Swedes.
Exactly. I think you make such a good point, and particularly with the kind of pandemic link, I think I see this as a real opportunity right now because, if we've got to turn the big negative that's going on in the world into something positive, for those of us that are living in a country where maybe they don't speak our mother tongue, it feels like a great opportunity to really throw yourself into, that part of the language that you've been putting off. You can't go out and be so social as you were before. So, why not throw that time into really honing your craft?
Totally agree. You got this time can be used so productively.
And that actually is a really nice segue into kind of the next thing that I wanted to talk to you about, which is, and I'm sure even if people don't know so much about the music side of your influences, I'm sure they've picked up from our conversation already that you've talked a lot about, the way that music and having an ear for music has really helped with language acquisition and things like that. So I really want to get deeper into the music side now. And I was going to ask you, it sounds like music has been a really big part of your life, and how did that come to be?
Yeah, absolutely. From a young age, my parents were, in a Gaelic choir, and there was lots of singing in the household, and lots of music, and just from early school days started playing instruments and sort of brass, trumpet, French horn, and singing in choirs myself, and then it was like guitar and being in bands, and it was like heavy metal music that period, like being obsessed with, remember Metallica and System of a Down and all those bands. I still love them, but it was when you're a teenager, it's that kind of cult. And then being in a band in school, then I was in a couple of bands in Glasgow, and then I sort of came to Sweden, and it was lovely to have a break from that. And just concentrate on the football, and then slowly the music just started coming back to me again, and now that's what I do basically here is music.
Yeah, and I think you can hear that in the way that you talk, even about when you came to Sweden to play football in the first instance. It sounds like you took that break from music, and then there was something that kind of pulled you back towards it, and it kind of needed to be part of your life again. How did that? What actually happened? What was it that how did you get back into music again?
Thomas, my friend who brought me here, he was saying, we have a great music scene here. There's a couple of bands that are from around here that are doing really well in Sweden and have been touring for, for decades. And I was like, okay, cool. I hadn't never heard of them. And then I came here and I realized that he was playing it down. Like, they were so serious. And, I just became friends with these guys. We had similar sort of music tastes and sports. And you meet these guys around the town at parties or whatever. And they needed a merch guy for just a weekend on one of their Swedish tours. And I just joined them, and I got so inspired by seeing, what they were up to.
Yeah, exactly. And you talked about, your music involvement with the band in your local area started as one weekend doing some merch work with them. But then I understand that became a kind of a bigger commitment, and you ended up quite involved with them on their travels around the country. Do you want to talk to us a little bit more about what that looked like?
Yeah, I mean, that first weekend, and then, a year passed, and I started doing more summers with them, summer tours. And then I think when I decided to move here 2016, that was then that was my responsibility. It was to deal with all the merchandise for these two bands. They have the same singer, but they're two bands and it's the same crew. And I dealt with all the orders and selling it on tour. And then over time that developed into, writing music together, or we were jamming together. And then, now it's more like we write the lyrics together for their records. I get to travel around all of Sweden and a bit of Europe as well. And that's another thing with meeting so many different people, like thousands of people on a tour.
Yeah.
From different places. You could be in Skåne one day, then Kiruna a couple of days later, way up north.
Yeah.
And that's when you start to observe differences in, Sweden's such a huge, like a long country. And that's where you start observing definitely the accents and just the mannerisms and how people are around a big country, basically. And I'm so grateful for that, yeah.
Yeah, and I think, I'm sure you'll agree that Sweden is in one of those countries that's a lot bigger and a lot more diverse than maybe you give it credit for before you really start to explore it. And with that in mind, I'm wondering, if you, having had the opportunity, this fantastic opportunity to travel around and see so many different sides of it, is there anything that really stands out as, either a place that you would really recommend people to go and experience, or somewhere that you'll never forget that was just like, hit you in quite a way?
Yeah, there's a few, definitely. And one would be pretty close to yourself, Linköping, Gamla Linköping. That is... when I was there, I don't know if they have a medieval week. Everyone was dressed up in like medieval clothing, and
yeah,
the architecture was amazing. I was like, well, maybe this is just the norm, like every day. But it was a great vibe, and it's similar with Visby on Gotland.
Mm.
They have that medieval week, and it's beautiful there. Lots of beautiful places. I just wish I could, be there for longer and not, I'm there working, but we do get to spend some free time around the towns and cities and see the places.
I wonder, have you, while you were travelling up in the north of Sweden, right up the high coast and beyond, have you been there when it's been winter time and seen, the northern lights, or seen, when it's dark all of the time? And I just wonder what your take on that was, if you have.
Yeah, I have. When I went to Kiruna, that was actually summer when I went there, and that was wild. Just light all the time, and it was pretty cold actually. I think it was maybe 5 degrees or something. But then one winter we went up all the way up to, I think, Umeå, Luleå, and the Kalix, and then up over, did a sort of tour of Finland, just went up, over and down. It's interesting, just the darkness, as you say.
Was there any kind of standout moment in your career with that band so far that, goes down in history as that was just, we made it?
Yeah, I mean, that was a moment with the latest album, or the previous album that I was a part of, like quite a lot of the songs in the album. And that album ended up getting nominated for a Swedish Grammy. So It was totally mental. And like they're so humble, these guys, and they're so used to these kind of accolades. So they're like, yeah, we're going to the Grammys. You want to come along, kind of thing. Like
Casual.
Totally casual. I love those guys because I've learned a lot from them, just how they conduct themselves in that business and the success that they've had, and just they just don't take themselves too seriously. They're so humble. But yeah, I was kind of buzzing inside, but on the surface I was like, yeah, cool, yes, I can come.
Yeah, what was the experience like?
Lots of great performances on the night, and obviously lots of big names in the Swedish music scene. And that's a funny thing for me as well, having gone around with these guys touring. Like I meet a lot of other artists, like Swedish artists, and I don't know who they are, whereas they could be a household name in Sweden, and I'm speaking to them, and then I get told like a day later, it's like, oh, that was blah 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 you were talking to, and then I've seen them on the TV and or whatever. I'm like, oh right, yeah, but it's interesting, and it's been a cool experience. And yeah, the Grammys night was cool. They didn't win, but it was fun to be there.
Absolutely, and just to get nominated and be part of that project is amazing in itself. And I can't leave this topic without asking. You said, meeting these Swedish household names and not realizing they were names until afterwards. Do any names come to mind that maybe people will have heard of or know?
Probably Zara Larsson. People probably heard of. That was funny because I had no clue who she was, and then I was like, okay, she's a pretty big deal. And also that Danny Saucedo, met him as well, and we had a lovely conversation just about all sorts. And then I realized afterwards who he was, seeing him on billboards and posters and everything. Like, oh yeah, that's that guy.
You're sounding like such a big deal now. You're basically Swedish royalty when it comes to the music scene. And on that topic, I've got to talk about, because you do solo work as well, right? And there's been a bit of a standout moment in your solo music work as well. I believe you played one of the biggest arenas in Stockholm. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, man, that was wild as well. I mean, I got my solo project going, and then I got this support slot. Basically these same bands that I sell merch for, but I got to open up the show for them at Skansen in Stockholm, which is like such a historic venue, and seeing the people that have played there and the whole scene and everything. And then there was 3 gigs, and one in Gothenburg as well, and it was like 8,000 people or something, and an outdoor gig in Gothenburg. And it was just me. Like when I play live just now, I just go up by myself. It's just me, a guitar and a mic, in this huge stage and 8,000 people. And I was just like, this is wild. And such a cool experience. And hopefully I can do that again sometime. But for now, obviously, there's no live music. But that was a total highlight. Just going up, playing my own songs, like a 20-25 minute set. Went on stage straight off, selling t-shirts for the other bands. I sold some of my own t-shirts as well, which was kind of cool.
That is
I got my own little batch of merchandise.
Yeah.
That was cool.
I was going to ask if you going from basically being, the star on the stage to, part of the roadie crew again. I wondered whether people came up to you and were like, yo, I saw you on stage, give us an autograph or something.
Yeah, definitely. That did happen. That was cool.
Yeah.
Lovely people. They were like, well done, did great. And yeah, I sort of have a good relationship with the fans of these bands because I'm basically the person that they speak to, the first person they see at the gig and the last person when they go out. And I always talk to them and have a good relationship with them, and they all support me with my own project as well. And it's a great vibe. And
I've got to ask about your own project. What does that look like? What's the story there?
Yeah, I mean, I'm working on new material now. I'm basically producing all my own stuff from this room, basically. As you said, being productive in the pandemic, I've basically like joined some courses in terms of, mixing and producing music. So. Mm-hmm. I'm just working on that now and just looking to get some more releases out. But this, the TikTok and Instagram stuff I've spent a lot of time on that as well.
I'm glad you mentioned the TikTok because, of course, I couldn't leave without mentioning that because you go from, hanging out with Zara Larsson to being a bit of a big name of your own when it comes to your TikTok. What's the story there? How did you get started on TikTok?
Yeah, man, that was just basically, I look at these music marketing YouTube channels, and they all say this is the big one. You have to get on. Well, you should get on TikTok in terms of organic growth and all these terms about audience, etc. And so I went on it, and I was going to do my music, but I just thought it's so saturated, like people trying to get their music out there. There's just so many great creators, and the music thing is tough. And I was just like, I'm going to do something that I enjoy and that is a sort of niche. So I just started doing sort of videos about life in Sweden and the whole Scotland versus Sweden thing, and just from my perspective, and putting a little tongue-in-cheek comedy spin on it, just like nothing too serious. And I just started picking up a little, and it became it's a cool community, really, because like the comment section on TikTok is wild, and you learn a lot of stuff. And then Swedes will always correct you if you get anything remotely wrong. And like sometimes I even put stuff wrong on purpose because I know that people just go crazy and be like, no, I have to correct this guy.
Yeah, and as I kind of alluded to earlier, it was my girlfriend that first showed me your stuff, because I would love to say I understood TikTok and how it works, but I'm clearly way more of a dinosaur than you are, and it's just not something I've been able to get my head around yet. But she showed me about 6 weeks ago some of your videos, and we were, of course, scrolling through, and you get lost for ages just scrolling through all of these videos and obviously relating on the experiences. I love the one standout one for me is when you compare how literal words are in Swedish when you translate them back into English, and you were talking about particularly female body parts. Really, really funny.
I was reading up on a lot about pregnancy and body parts in the Swedish words, and it was just so funny.
Yeah.
So matter of fact.
It's so true, and there's a lot of words like that in Swedish, as you say, where it kind of you just, if you translate them back, it makes total sense, but then when you think about the words they've put together, you think, wow, there's just there's no beating around the bush with this one.
No.
And at the start of today's episode, we showed one of your clips. So there are 3 things I will never get used to living in Sweden, as kind of a flavour to people about the kind of style that you go for. And I know that's one of your popular videos as well. What is the most popular one, by the way? Do you know that?
It could be that one, or there's another one I did first. First one that got a bit of attention was basically how to sound like you're fluent in Swedish when you really don't have a vocabulary at all, and it's just all about the reactions and the the liksom and typ and jaha and alltså and all these little connectors that you can put in and like to fool people. But it's a big part of learning language. Like, I made a sort of joke out of it, but it's a huge part of my process was to pick up these little words that people say all the time just in conversation, and then people can believe that you're actually much better at Swedish than you really are.
Yeah, no, exactly. Fake it till you make it. I love it. And I've seen the video you're talking about, and there's another one that sticks out there when you talk about how Swedish people use the same word twice in lots of different contexts, even like the greeting hey hey and things like that, and the way that they use language and it's kind of like, in case you didn't catch it the first time, let's do it again. That whole is very different to what we're used to, but super, super interesting.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that also Swedes have like that self-deprecating humor as well. They can take the mick out of themselves as well. And that's a great thing to have, is that they maybe didn't notice that they did this. Yeah. And then someone picks it out and they're like, actually, that's pretty funny.
No, totally. And you said, obviously, you started this whole TikTok thing as a way of, I guess, related to the music and sort of driving some traffic there. It's kind of become a bit of a beast of its own. So what's next for you in the TikTok world? Of course, once you and your Sambo have settled in, the new member of your family.
Yeah, I don't know, man. It has become its own kind of thing. I mean, there's only so much content you can get from this, but I enjoy doing the little sort of sketches like as well, like just having characters, or basically I'm just speaking to myself in this room like a maniac, making sort of sketches. I'll probably continue to do that and see where it goes. And it's really cool when you've got in touch and join your podcast, and Yeah, we'll see. We'll see how it goes. It's nice to have the audience there, and I really appreciate them being there and the conversation that we have. And then, you know, some of them do go towards my music as well, which is really cool.
Yeah, definitely. As you say, I think it's really, you can really hear talking to you that, you know, it's all about the genuineness of creating that kind of, it's quite an organic community that's come together, and having that dialogue and kind of being part of that atmosphere. You can see that your background is in music, and the way that bleeds into everything else that kind of you do, and the way that you look at things. I think that's super, super interesting. And I was going to say on that point, if there's anyone on watching this video that hasn't, for whatever reason, they've been living under a rock and they haven't discovered your TikTok or, you know, whatever else yet, where is the best places for them to come and find you online?
Yeah, well, that would be it. TikTok, Archie McCallum, and then Instagram as well. And basically there's links to the Spotify through that. Same name, Archie McCallum on Spotify. Mm-hmm. That's where my music is. So yeah, those are the main ones.
Well, we'll make sure to chuck the links to all of those in the description below as well, so that people can go and enjoy that. And just to get, you know, a taste of what to expect when they come to your music, what is your, just to kind of finish this off, how would you describe your music?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, I would say, alternative pop rock with, you know, a bit of melancholy in there, and same with the lyrics as well. So yeah, just melodic, sort of alternative on the pop rock spectrum.
Okay, interesting. That sounds super, super fascinating. So yeah, I hope some people will go and check you out and give you some streams, and yeah, look forward to seeing what happens next with your music, of course, as well as the TikTok journey. Maybe next you'll be doing some sort of collab project with Zara Larsson or something on your TikTok, or we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, why not? Why not? Sounds good to me.
Yeah. Well, as I say, thank you again so much for your time today. It's been super interesting to kind of get an insight into your background, how you've got to where you are today, the whole music piece. All the best with your next little adventure in life as well. And yeah, look forward to following you online.
Yeah, thank you, Greg. Cheers for getting in touch, and I've absolutely loved our chat today. And all the best with your channel. I think it's going to continue to grow, and I'll be watching.
Really kind, likewise. Okay, take care. Okay, well, that's all for this episode, guys. I hope you really enjoyed that conversation. I would love to hear what you think in the comments below. If there's anything I didn't ask that you would have asked, or, you know, other guests that you think I should ask to come on in the future, make sure you let me know. And then once you're done with that, if you're not subscribed already, please make sure you subscribe and turn on that bell so you're notified as soon as I put out a new video, and you can be the first one to check out the next episode. Anyway, that's all for today. I hope you have a good day, whatever you're up to, and I will see you again soon. Bye, guys.